Hello, I'm John Michael Lander, speaker, author, and the founder of An Athlete's Silence. I want to thank the John J. Brunetti Human Trafficking Academy and Professor Dr. Rosa Batty for inviting me to offer this presentation on breaking the silence, the predatory grooming trifecta in sports. As a 14-year-old Olympic-bound athlete, the adults entrusted with my training and sponsorship groomed me and sex trafficked me for all 4 years of my high school career, while I still represented the United States in national and international competitions, where I won gold medals at the Norway Cup and the Danish Cup. There is a misconception in society that trafficking only happens in dark alleys, foreign countries, on the street corners, only affects the poor, runaways, and only females. I've learned as I've traveled all over the globe and had opportunities to speak that most people view labor trafficking with only male survivors and sex trafficking with only female survivors. Trafficking of any kind does not discriminate against gender, age, race, social economics, etc. And I beg you to create not to create categories or classifications, because when we do that, we can miss the signs. Trafficking can sometimes wear a tuxedo. It can sometimes happen in luxurious suites. Sometimes it can happen in locker rooms, on private airplanes. Sometimes it happens in elite sports. Sometimes it happens in the very places that society celebrates as successful. I call this the CEO trafficking, where the predators present an opportunity and not necessarily focus on vulnerabilities or visible poverty or the dangers, as we are constantly informed about. Trafficking does not always require chains. Some of the chains could be opportunities, dreams, scholarships, sponsorships. I never felt vulnerable. I was from a modest family. My father was an architect. I was popular in school, top of my class, editor of the yearbook, a class officer. I grew up in a rural area where no one imagined that sex exploitation would ever happen because everyone seemed to know everyone and know their business and what was going on. So there was no secrets. But sometimes there will appear a victim who is a promising male athlete who has been taught his entire life to stay silent. That athlete is me. So there's a question becomes, if trafficking is so difficult to stop, so hidden, so adaptive, so complex, why do we keep fighting? Because we must. Yes, there is no single solution. Yes, predators will continue to evolve and adapt, but so will we. Because every educated professional interrupts the pattern. Every aware parent creates friction, and every trained community reduces opportunity. So we know that the International Labor Organization estimates that 27.6 million people worldwide are trapped in forced laboring and sex trafficking. In the United States, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children report that 1 in 5 runaways are approached for trafficking within 48 hours. The average age of recruitment to exploitation is often between the ages of 12 and 14 years old. Traffickers rely on access, opportunity, and silence. And it's our job to disrupt all three. Many people believe that trafficking happens only when large sporting events are coming into the area, like the FIFA World Cup or the Super Bowl, March Madness, the Olympics. Let's be real for a moment. The trafficking business has always and will always be in the areas before the events arrive. There are debates that trafficking increases when these events occur, and that may be true. However, many CEO traffickers have already booked suites and VIP sections months to a year before the event even takes place, which also puts them off the radar. Over the years, through my work with survivors, especially male athletes, I have developed what I call the predatory grooming trifecta. Today, I'm going to give a generalized overview. For more detailed presentations or informations, please contact the John J. Brunetti Human Trafficking Academy and Professor Dr. Rosa Patti. They can give you more information or how to contact me. But most people believe predators groom only the child. But through my lived experience and working with athletes, I have discovered that sophisticated predators groom in three stages. One, they will groom the institution and the organization first, then they will groom the parent or the guardian, and then they will groom the child or the athlete. This can give protection to the predator for years. In sports, predators position themselves as untouchable so that the organization, institution protects them. Like we have seen with US Gymnastics, the Ohio State University, Penn State, Michigan State, University of Michigan, Boy Scouts of America, many educational arenas, and also in religious sectors. What I'm going to try to do today is to demonstrate how the predatory grooming trifecta works through my story. So the first step is grooming the institution or the organization. What makes trafficking so difficult for people to recognize is that it does not often look dangerous at first. It can look very organized and successful. I grew up with dreams. Like many young athletes, I believed that hard work, discipline, and sacrifice would open doors to opportunities. I trained relentlessly. I trusted adults, coaches, sponsors, influential people. As an elite athlete, I was surrounded by adults who appeared powerful, respectful, connected, and generous. One of these people was a lawyer. When I was 14, and after I placed eighth at the Junior Olympics in Lincoln, Nebraska, a newspaper wrote about me. I thought this was my 15 minutes of fame. This lawyer read the article, and then he contacted my team. And why does that matter? Well, because predators in elite environments rarely appear reckless, they appear professional. This lawyer did not begin by grooming me. He groomed my team's board members first, building trust, offering them a group of professionals that were willing to sponsor scholarships for athletes and other amenities that the team was not previously provided for. The lawyer promised that he and his professional friends would provide new swimsuits, new warm ups, installed new equipment, the latest equipment, and also provide a new coach that would take the team to national, international, and possible Olympic status. He became so respected, helpful, connected. He was like the solution to all the problems. And he was supportive of our athletic dreams. He even drew up a contract for the board to sign, which they did. After he had the contract signed with the board members, then he focused on my mother and groomed her. Over a period of a couple of months, he presented her with these incredible opportunities. He also provided a pro bono support from all of the professionals, whatever their jobs were, like a doctor or a therapist or anything. They would provide like doctor's appointments, medicines, eyeglasses, anything pro bono, not a penny from my parents. My sister had a sledding accident and had needed plastic surgery on her chin. Everything was taken care of, and not a penny from my parents. All my mother had to do was to promise to make sure that I was in the right place at the right time and in the right attire of clothing that they wanted. The lawyer did warn my mother that if I was not able to uphold these obligations and keep the professionals happy, he would sue my parents for all the pro bono gifts and have me and my brothers and sisters put into foster care. So, as sweet as my mother was, she thought she was helping me trying to reach my dreams. And she also thought it could help the family. Everything looked legitimate. She signed a contract. It was only when the lawyer had the organization of board members and my mother on board did he ever approach me. This lawyer began taking me to nice dinners and very elaborate places. He told me that my parents could only take me so far and that they did a great job, and that he and his professionals could take me all the way to the Olympics. He told me all I had to do was to keep my grades up, do my best in competitions, and make sure the professionals were happy. He also provided me with the same warnings that he gave my mother. So he also told me that if my mother agreed, why wouldn't I? And I thought that was a great point. So I thought I was going to be able to accomplish my dreams while helping my family. This lawyer also made it clear that I was not to say anything to anyone, since the professionals were only interested in me. Although they promised the board members that they were going to give scholarships to several athletes, their intent was only one, me, and no one else on my team. I signed a contract. Yes, all of a sudden there were new swimsuits, new warm-ups. We got the latest diving equipments and a new coach. I was presented with VIP invitations, taken to high-end environments, got to go to private parties and in mansions, was taken around in private airplanes to parties all over the world. I was trafficked in VIP sections of college bowls, the Super Bowl, March Madness, award shows, the Academy Awards, the Tony Awards. By the time I realized something was deeply wrong, the architecture of grooming had already been completed. The institution trusted these people. My family trusted these people. My family invited them to dinner at my house. I would sit across from my predator or next to my predator while trying to eat. And I had become emotionally trapped in a system I did not yet understand. My predators understood power. They understood access. They understood how to hide exploitation behind opportunity. They knew how to make a young athlete believe that this was all normal. This was the price for success. They also informed me that nobody would ever believe me. And they told me that I should be lucky because I was hand selected. No one else was. And perhaps the most dangerous message was real men don't talk about this. So I stayed silent, not because I lacked courage, but because shame is one of the most effective weapons traffickers use against boys and men. The predatory grooming trifecta demonstrated that the predator will only focus on the child after the organization and institution and the parents and guardians are in place. If the predator cannot get these first two in place, they will tend to move on to another child or athlete and drop that first one. Predators do not always groom the most vulnerable, as we're often told. In elite sports, they focus on what they desire. I have seen where they went after the most popular, the most talented on a team, because it was a challenge. Predators do not groom children or athletes with any chronological step or agenda. I have seen a predator groom 5 different children on the same team 5 different ways. There is no rhyme or reason to grooming. And when the predator feels that things are getting too complicated or too hot, they will simply move to another team and start the whole process over. By grooming the organization and the institution first, they can guarantee protection. Like I said, like we saw with US Gymnastics. The CEO is more concerned about scholarships and his 6 figures than being affected by accusations and bad press. And in the same case, the predator abused these young athletes with the parents and the guardians in the room during medical examinations. He would use the medical jargons while abusing the child with his back to the parent or the guardian. And I say guardian in this case because US Gymnastics, the elite, went to a camp, a training camp in Texas, where their parents were not allowed to come. So they were assigned guardians. And these guardians would be in the same room with the child when they are having their medical examinations. Later, when the athlete would say something that it felt wrong, or it felt like it didn't feel like it was supposed to be this way, the parent or the guardian would defend the doctor and say that he was doing what he needed to do to get that athlete back into the gym. So what does the young child think? It must be okay. Athletes are conditioned to override discomfort. We praise pain tolerance, obedience, loyalty, endurance, sacrifice. These qualities can create an extraordinary champion, but without safeguards, athletes can become defenseless. Young athletes are often taught, don't complain, push through it, trust the process, and do whatever it takes. Predators use these messages for their advantage, and they exploit the athlete, especially in elite environments where money, sponsorship, prestige, scholarships, Olympic dreams, and celebrity culture intersect. Athletes are only looked on as numbers, not people. I was constantly told that if I didn't like the way things were transpiring, there were 5 other people just waiting to take my place. As an athlete, I was constantly told that I was replaceable and that no one would ever believe me. And if it ever got out, no one would ever work with me again. And if I didn't comply, my dreams of representing my country in international and Olympic competitions would be over, ended. If I didn't comply, I would be blacklisted and never compete again. You know, I want to take a moment and think about this. I want you all to think for a moment. If the stat, 1 in 4 females and 1 in 6 males experience sexual abuse before the age of 18, according to the CDC, this stat can be abstract because many times athletes are not reporting. So let me try to make this real. So at the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris, there were roughly 10,500 athletes competing. And if this stat is true, 1 in 4 females and 1 in 6 males. And let's keep in mind that many experts believe that athletes face even greater exploitation due to power dynamics, isolation, travel, dependency on authority figures. Then this stat would represent thousands of these Olympians may have been experienced as sexual abuse and competed in silence. Thousands. Thousands walking into the opening ceremonies carrying invisible trauma. thousands competing while managing silence, thousands smiling for the cameras while privately battling shame, guilt, confusion, fear, and unresolved pain. Now, think about it again. We talked about it. The FIFA World Cup is coming. March Madness was here. The Super Bowl was here. Olympic training centers, youth academies, elite clubs and sports. And also, don't forget, 2028, the Olympics in Los Angeles. How many athletes will be competing silent? How many fear disclosures? Because how many are afraid to disclose because their identity, their career, their scholarship, their sponsorship, or their masculinity feels tied to secrecy? And they could be told that they cannot represent their country. We've seen this happen in many elite sports. And these stories are not just rare stories, they're hidden stories. For example, one young athlete who was in the top 5 at the Olympic trials for the gymnastics team had already come forward and said that she was abused. Now, with gymnastics, they go into a room and they figure out who the team is going to be by the overall performances over the years and da da da, who is most consistent. All these excuses that we hear. When they announced that Olympic team for that year, she was not on it. She was not even placed as an alternate, and she finished in the top 5. Who were they protecting? So these are not rare stories. These are hidden stories. For male survivors, silence is often reinforced by a culture itself. Boys are taught men always want sex. It doesn't matter from whom. Men cannot be victims. Strength means emotional suppression. Vulnerability is weakness. If you are male, it's not really sex if you engage sexually with another male. It's just getting off. So, when exploitation happens, many males do not even initially identify what happened as abuse, especially if there was any feeling of affection, mentorship, financial support, opportunity, physical bonding, or emotional attachment involved. This confusion is exactly what predators rely on. And many predators who abuse males rely on the fact that those male victims are not going to report. They count on it. They're banking on it. And the statistics likely represents only a fraction of reality because the underreporting among male athletes remains extraordinarily high. I truly believe that children want to tell someone about what's happening. They just don't know how or who to trust or how to tell it. I know that I did. I wanted to tell people. For years, I believed silence protected me. But silence protects the system and the predators, not the survivors. However, I did try to tell someone. First, I tried to tell my mother. I remember it was my 16th birthday, and the professional drove into our driveway, and my mother was standing at the door, and she says, "It's time to go." And I said, "No, I'm not going." And I said, and she said, "Well, why not? That's rude. He's all the way here." And I said, wait a minute." I thought to myself, if I tell her the truth, maybe all this would stop. This would be all over. And I said to her, I said, "Look, I don't want to go." And she asked me again why. And I confessed, "He touches me." And she asked me, "What?" And like as if she didn't hear me. And I said, "He touches me." And she said, "Where?" And I said, "Down there." And I indicated, and she looked at me really funny and she got this strange look on her face. And then all of a sudden, her lips became very thin and her eyes narrowed. and she slapped me across the face. And she said, "It's not nice to make up lies about people. He's the pillar of the community, and he is helping with your diving. If anything did happen, it must have been your fault. Now you go and don't keep him waiting." So as I walked out to the car, I can remember feeling the headlights, the heat from the headlights on my legs as I went to the passenger side. And I realized at that moment that if my mother didn't believe me, who would? And yet, I tried to give indicators at school. I figured that if I could get an adult to ask me what was going on, that I had to respect them because they were adults. I mean, that's how I grew up. I do know that I had signed that contract and I was not allowed to say anything. An NDA was there. I was never allowed to go and tell anyone what was happening. So I thought that if I could get an adult to ask, it was okay. So again, I was a kid that could not have any dirt on me. If I found dirt on my clothes, I would actually leave school, go all the way home, change, and try to get back to my next class. I figured then that if I wore the same outfit, and I had to make sure that it was baggy because I always wore things that I thought made me look good. And so if I wore baggy clothes, the same clothes for a whole week, someone's going to ask me something about it. No one did. Then I decided that I would keep wearing the same stinky clothes for another week and not take a shower. Now, again, I was one of these kids that had to take 3 or 4 showers a day. And I was like, this will get their attention, of course, right? No one said anything. I had once overheard my mother saying to another mother, "Oh, it's probably just because he's a teenager, that he's going through things. He's always in the pool." And that was the thing that I hated. I couldn't stand the smell of chlorine, so I was always trying to wash it off. And so that's where the 3 or 4 showers came in a day. And then finally, I thought, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to try one other thing. Again, I was one of those small kids, and if I cussed, everybody would laugh. It just never made sense. And so I thought that I would shout out the F bomb as loud as I could in the hallway, the classroom, the pool, the gym, the locker room, anywhere and everywhere I could. Because then I knew somebody's going to say, "Hey, something's going on. What is it? Talk to me." And no one ever asked me. Just a few years ago, I ran into one of my teachers in high school and we talked a little bit about it. And she apologized. And she said, we all thought that you were going through so much pressure representing the United States that we just thought you were blowing off steam. Well, after college, after high school, I graduated and I went to the furthest college I could go to. And I went to a college in California. And I had never had any professional help. And I found myself going into similar situations. I was popular again. I had won the gold medals at the Norway Cup and the Danish Cup, and I was ready to, everyone thought I was going to the Olympics, so everyone buzzed about me on campus. And so I found that I was being stalked by a grad student. I had met him at one time when I was moving into the dorms. Someone said that I must have upset him somehow. I don't know. I don't ever remember seeing him. So what I started getting were these messages from him on my dorm room door, uh, at practices on my bag where my towels were, also in my classrooms where I sat. He had figured it all out and he knew where I was, and so he was following me and leaving these kind of cryptic messages. And so I just kind of ignored them and went on with my life. And then eventually one day I woke up in the wooded area of college on the campus and I had to go to the medical center. I could not go. And so I went, and as they're, doing their investigation and treating me, um, they said that they needed to call the police and they needed to call my parents, and I begged them, please don't do that, please just don't do that. I'm going to be okay. Just let me know what I need. and I had to take a rape kit, and it was provided by a male nurse. And the whole time the kit was going on, he made me feel that I caused this, that I must have wanted this, and that it just got out of hand and it got a little violent, and that I should be ashamed that I ever came in for help. And so I went into a real deep depression, and I got very, very sick, and I had to be shipped back home to Ohio. And so this medical team had called my mother. My mother called the lawyer. The lawyer got the ticket for me and brought me home, and I was put right back into the cycle. So while I was here in Ohio, I didn't want to just sit around and do anything. So I enrolled in the local university, and I decided that I would study acting and dance because I found that dance was the closest thing to diving, and I liked that freedom. And I remember the first day of class, I was in the stretching out, and all these people around. The energy was amazing. And this professional dancer was our professor, and she had been on Broadway and done TV specials and everything, and she's a celebrity. And she came up and she looked at me really funny, and she said, "Meet me in my office after class." And I was like kind of perplexed, and I said, "Okay, whatever." So I meet with her, and the first thing she says is, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I want to dance." And she kind of laughed and she looked at me and she said, I see that look in your eye. There's more to it. So why don't we just meet every day, just for a little bit, just come in and say hi. And so she got to the point where she got me to trust her, and she would ask open-ended questions. And she seemed really interested in who I was. And she noticed my talent. And again, she started talking about that. And eventually I told her what was happening with the professionals. The next thing I know, she's driving me to the airport. She hands me a one-way ticket to California. And she said, I talked to the people at General Hospital where I had done some extra work, and they're willing to give you some more extra work and a place to stay. But what you can't do is tell your mother where you are. She's telling the professionals so that they can keep an eye on where you are. This professional dancer is the one who got me out of the system and the cycle. So I owe my life to her. My healing began when I finally understood my story was not my shame, but it was evidence of what the predators did, evidence of how the institution failed me, and evidence of how urgently we need to change. When a survivor speaks, systems no longer can pretend to ignore it. And when men speak, we challenge dangerous cultural myths that keep boys trapped in silence. So today, I would like to present some calls to action, just simple things that you can do. Like one, believe survivors faster, especially male survivors. Do not filter disclosures through stereotypes. Trauma does not always look emotional. Sometimes it looks numb, angry, just detached, confused, successful, addictive, or overachieving. Believe survivors. Two, shift from reactive to proactive and preventative. We can only respond. Well, that's not how I want to say that. I want to say that we cannot only respond after the abuse occurs. If we can respond before, we can stop it. Organizations must implement trauma informed education, create clear reporting systems, train staff on grooming behaviors, establish independent oversights, and prioritize athletes and children's safety over reputation. Three, understand grooming beyond the child. We must educate communities on institutional grooming and parental grooming and CEO grooming. We need to provide that predators rarely operate randomly and stop them from moving to another team or another organization. We need to make sure that the history follows and is part of their story. And because I really believe that we sometimes look at predators that this is their first offense. But if you really think about it, predators have been doing this for years. This is not normally the first time. They just got caught this time. And we need to build ecosystems of protection for children and athletes. We need to create safe space for boys and men. We really do. A lot of people who are, frontliners and people who are helping survivors and trafficking victims are only trained and taught on how to work with female survivors. Male survivors need their own language, support, therapy, advocacy, community, and permission to speak. We must normalize conversations around male victimizations without shame or ridicule. 5, equate success with safety. We need to stop that. We need to stop thinking that if something is successful, it is safe. That is not true. Elite environments are not automatically safe environments. Prestige is not protection. Fame is not character. Power must never replace accountability. And 6, ask better questions. Instead of asking, why didn't they tell someone? We should ask, what system taught them to be silent? What power structure benefits from secrecy? Who was being protected? Who was being ignored? And what would safety have actually required? Listen, children do not fail systems. Systems fail children. Let me leave you with these couple of thoughts. Wherever there is an unbalance of power, there is always the possibility of abuse. Silence may protect predators temporarily, but truth protects generations. Thank you so much again for this time with you. And again, I'm John Michael Lander.